Hello, welcome today to Tech Talk Tuesday. We are answering as many immigration questions as we can over these next few minutes. So if you have any questions, go ahead and put them down in the comments, either in Facebook or here in TikTok, and we will begin answering them right now. My name is Mercer Cauley. I'm a partner here at Cauley Forsyth, and I'm a board immigration specialist here in North Carolina. Great news is that immigration is federal, so we can answer questions from all over the country and all over the world about immigration. It does not have to be here in North Carolina. So I'm joined today by attorney Raquel. Raquel, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. As Attorney Mercer said, my name is Raquel Fernandez, and I'm an associate attorney here at Cauley Forsyth. We are live every Tuesday at noon answering your questions in English, and every Friday at noon Eastern Time answering your questions in Spanish. And sometimes we do get questions in Spanish here, and we'll translate them and make sure that, maybe you can type better in Spanish. We'll answer the questions in English just to make sure that we have both English and Spanish speakers and have their voices heard.
Absolutely. So thank you for the likes. I see the likes coming up. Thank you for that. And also, if you want to share, go ahead and share it so that way we can get as much information out as we possibly can about immigration. Now, I did see one question go up about you've been petitioning for your husband, it looks like for 8 years, and you're asking for help or asking a question. So we need a little bit more information. Or if you're not comfortable typing information into the comments, you can always call us and set up a consultation. Our consultations are free, and that is 704-522-6363. But if you put more information in the comments, we'll try to answer it here.
Absolutely. And we have a question here regarding the U visa. So this will be the first question of the day. And just explaining the U visa process, what goes into that?
Sure. So for those of you who don't know what a U visa is, a U visa is a visa for people that have been the victims of violent crime. And so the Congress has listed out there's some specific crimes that considered violent crimes. And so those could be like an aggravated assault or certain types of domestic violence. And so they have a whole list. So if you have been the victim of a crime and reported it to the police and helped the police or the district attorney solve the case or prosecute the case in court, then you may be eligible for what's called a U visa. And a U visa is for people who are the victim of violent crimes. You ask the police to certify it first. After you certify it, after the police certify it, then you file for the U visa. Now, the problem with the U visa is that right now it is taking about 7 years for the whole process to go through for you to get the visa. But the good news is that once you get the visa and you've been in U visa status for 3 years, you can apply for a green card and be a permanent resident. Once you're a permanent resident, 5 years, you can file for citizenship. So it is a pathway that can lead to citizenship, but that's the process overall for a U visa. That's a great general question of how the process works. So that's a very good question. So thank you guys for following. That's a great thing we want to point out is that Daca update on the rule is coming out sometime in August. So if you go ahead and follow us, as soon as we go live about that, we will be able to answer questions, and we're putting everything out there about Daca.
Yep. And we get that question every week. We totally understand. We're waiting as well, so we can't imagine how you're feeling if you've applied for DACA first time and you're just waiting to get that decision, or you've just been waiting to finally be able to apply. We're looking out for you guys, so make sure you follow us, and we'll definitely keep you posted.
Absolutely. Have a question here from Tamara. And Tamara, your question is that you have filed for your stepkids, and it's been 1.5 years and you haven't heard anything. So what you have to keep in mind is that hopefully you received a receipt notice. When you file everything initially, you get a receipt notice. That lets you know that the government has received your application. After that happens, it can take a while. Right now, adjustment of status is taking about 1 year, maybe a little over. So that seems to be a little long, but I wouldn't say it's too far out of the ordinary. But especially if you're a U.S. citizen, it is taking a little long. If you are a permanent resident, then that make sense of why it's taking that long. But you should have a receipt notice that lets you know how long, or lets you know that the government has at least received it, so that it's processing.
And I have a question here from Zororo, and he asks, hi, when you become a U.S. citizen, are there any ways it can get revoked, or any way that you can be removed from the United States as a U.S. citizen?
So yes, there is. It's not an easy process. Once you become a citizen, if you've naturalized through the process, citizenship can be revoked if they find that you committed fraud in getting the citizenship somehow. But it's not just a matter of immigration coming back and revoking citizenship. They can't do that. It actually is a full federal court hearing where they actually have to go to a federal judge, present a case to a federal judge, convince a federal judge, and the burden is 100% on them. And if the federal judge agrees, then they can revoke your citizenship, and then you'll return back into whatever it was before. But that process does not happen very often. Most of the time when you hear about it, it's relating to, even though these cases have been very, very old, but relating to cases with Nazis from the 1940s who lied on the application in order to get here, and that's where they're being revoked now. But you don't hear about it very often. Usually it's something that severe, that something was lied about on a petition. And like I said, the case that it happens most with these days is when, even though it's 50 years ago, it is, or 70 years ago, it's relating to Nazi Germany.
Yep. And that's a great question. I don't know if we've ever gotten a question like that.
I don't think we have. Yeah, I was involved with one denaturalization case, and I've been practicing for 20 years. So that lets you know it doesn't happen very often. And I was involved with one. So it does happen, but it's very rare that it does. Have a few questions here about U visa, and Tehran, you put one up there. So with the U visa right now, like I said, it's taking about 7 years. So if you filed in 2017, you're still probably a year and a half, maybe a year away from being approved for the U visa. But the good news is they are doing something called deferred action. And with deferred action, it's very similar to Daca. They'll give you a work authorization card and give you some other benefits. And so there's a possibility you'll get deferred action before you get the U visa. So there's a chance that may be coming very soon. But as far as your U visa itself, you're still within the processing times of what we're seeing. We're seeing approvals coming from 2016. So if you filed in 2017, you're probably still about a year away. But thank you for the question. And thank you, everybody, for the likes. We really appreciate that. That's it.
Absolutely. And thank you also to Alberto and Delia, who have sent us some gifts, some ice cream cones and finger hearts. Thank you guys so much for sending those.
So,
and Navy.
And there you go.
Thank you to Navy and Alberto. That's awesome.
So have a question or two coming up here. One, it sounds like is dealing with a waiver. It sounds like you have a family member that has a 10-year bar from returning to the United States. So what happens with that is if somebody is in the United States without status and stays here for more than a year and then leaves, even if they have the ability to get a visa and come back in, there can be a 10-year bar from coming back in. And so if that's the case, there are waivers that are available for that. And it's a 601 waiver, but you have to have a relative that qualifies. And that's like a U.S. citizen spouse, U.S. citizen parents, permanent resident spouse, permanent resident parents, and that these people would suffer a hardship, an extreme hardship, if you're not allowed to come back in. So there is a way around the 10-year waiver, but in that case, you have to apply for the waiver and get it.
Absolutely. And I have a question here from Melissa Jimenez, and she asks, can a person that has been deported 21 years ago be able to get their citizenship or their residence back? I think she said refer papers back, but I think she means maybe getting their green card back after being deported.
So after somebody's deported, you can't necessarily just get your green card back. But if you still have the qualifying relatives, so such as a U.S. citizen child over the age of 21, they can file for you to come back to the United States and get a visa. So it is possible to re-enter and come back in the United States with a new green card, but there's no way to apply to get the old green card back. You have to start the whole process and go through it. And if you were deported that long ago, it sounds like any of the bars from coming in are going to be gone, but you may need a waiver for the deportation, but you should be able to get back in the U.S. if you still have the qualifying relatives.
Great question.
Have one here. My green card is expiring next year, and I applied for a new one last year, and it's still not here. And that is happening right now. So what is happening with green cards is when you file for a new one that's expiring, they'll give you an extension. Sometimes that extension is only good for a year, though. So if you've gone past that, year, there is a way to contact immigration and get a stamp in your passport that extends your permission even longer. You're still a permanent resident even after it expires, but you need evidence. You need the proof that the card is still valid. So you can get a stamp in your passport that shows that the card is still valid, so that you can continue to do everything you need to do with driver's license and traveling, getting everything together. So you can get that. It's doing InfoPass at USCIS to get a stamp in your passport so that you're allowed to show you're still a permanent resident.
And I have a question here from El Tigrillo 89, and he says, my girlfriend has DACA. We want to get married. Will she have to leave the country to obtain her residency?
Okay, so I'm assuming that you are a U.S. citizen. So you're a U.S. citizen, your girlfriend has DACA, and you're planning on getting married. So it depends on her entry. If she entered with a visa initially and you're a U.S. citizen, then she wouldn't have to leave the country. But if she entered without a visa the first time she entered the United States and has only had that one entry, hasn't gone back and forth, then yes, then what can happen is she can obtain a travel document, leave, go back to her home country for a day, a week, 2 weeks, however long she wants, come back in. When she comes back in, then you can file for adjustment of status. So it is possible to do it, but it's going to depend on how she initially came into the country, with or without a visa. That's going to determine whether she has to leave on advanced parole and come back in or not.
And so if she entered without a visa and then she traveled on advanced parole, she would have a legal entry to be able to do adjustment of status in that case.
Exactly. It's like the stamp in the passport. When she comes back in the country, it's like it gets rid of that initial entry, so you don't have to worry about it.
Yep.
Okay, so questions are coming in quickly. We're going to try to get to all of them. So if we don't get to it, we apologize, but we're going to try to get as many as we can. My mom is married to a resident, and her husband petition is taking, it says, I'm not sure if that's 5 to 7 months or 57 months. So I'm not sure which one it is, but typically if you're married and you're filing for a green card for a resident or to become a resident, right now it's usually taking about a year. So if it's been pending 5 to 7 months, that's not unusual. Expect that one to take about a year before they will get to that.
And I have a question here from Brianna Guzman, and she says, hello, can DACA recipients join the military? Can DACA recipients join the military?
And yes, DACA recipients can join the military, but what you'd have to do is speak to the officer and let them get, but based on what we've seen before is that they would be able to join the military. Got a question here. What is the process on a double entry to the U.S. without legal status? So that's a great question. And what happens is that if you enter the United States without status, then you leave the United States after you've been here for a year and then re-enter. What that triggers is what's called a permanent bar. And so if you leave the United States again, is going to be a permanent bar from coming back to the United States. So that means you would not be able to just come right back in. You'd have to wait 10 years before they would ever even file a waiver for you to come back in. So the permanent bar is very serious. If you ever hear it, it's called 212A9C. That's a part of law. And so if you have a congressman or a senator that you want to speak with about that, contact them and let them know that needs to be overturned. But that's what happens if you have multiple entries. Have a question here. I overstayed my B1 visa, left the US, spent time, hold on a second, it just went up. Spent time outside. Can I have an F2B green card denied? So it's going to depend on, you say you overstayed your B visa, how long you overstayed your B visa. Because if you overstayed your B visa by more than 365 days, you heard us just talking about the waivers, is you'd have a 10-year bar when you left, so you would have to have a waiver to get back in. So it really depends on how long you were out, and in order to get back in, you would need a qualifying relative for that waiver. And like I said before, qualifying relatives are parents that are U.S. citizens or permanent residents, spouses that are U.S. citizens or permanent residents. Okay. Do you have some questions over there? I've got some coming through here, Craig. We're trying to get to them.
So I have a lot of DACA questions here, and this one comes from Alex Jimenez, and he's wondering, he says, I got denied DACA for warrant favorable exercise. I have a clean record. So his DACA was denied, and I guess he's wondering what the next step would be.
Okay. So with that, what we would need, with denials like that, my suggestion is to set up a consultation, because we would need to look through and be able to read the denial as to what they're saying to see if we can attack it and we can overcome it. So if it's something like they're saying you didn't provide enough evidence or you failed to send in documents we requested, then we know how to go through that. But we need to see exactly why they're denying it, and then we'd be able to give you a better answer. But good news is you can set up a consultation. Our consultations are free, 704-522-6363, and we can answer that question for you.
And the numbers are also listed in our bios, so you can go to CF Immigration, or you can go to my page, and it's right there, 704-522-6363 for a free consultation.
Okay, let me see. Got a lot of questions coming in, so we're sorry if we missed some of them. We're trying to get as many as we can. Is adjustment of status for marriage to a military member faster? And in that case, it can be, especially if adjustment of status is taking place and that military member is going to be deployed. So if they're going to be leaving the U.S., the military can get involved and speed it up some. So it can make it quicker. Doesn't always make it quicker, but it can make it quicker. It really depends on the status of your spouse. So Rose said it's going to depend on if your spouse is being deployed or if your spouse is here, but he can contact, or he or she can contact the military on the base to find out if they can step in and make it faster. But there has to be a reason. They can't just make it faster automatically, though.
And I have a question here from Antonio Castro, and he asks, are all the laws the same in every state? So are the laws the same in every state? So not every law is the same in every state, but immigration law is federal. So immigration law is uniform for the most part. There are certain circuits and sometimes cases that take precedent. But when we answer this information, it does apply to every state.
Exactly. Yep. Okay. So thank you everybody for the likes. We really, really appreciate it. And thank you for following. We're trying to get as much information, to have one here about DACA. So for Genesis, there aren't any updates right now on DACA. And that's why I say go ahead and follow, because we're expecting something this month. And as soon as we get a notice, we're going to be out here telling everybody what the news is on DACA. So we're expecting that very, very, very soon. So go ahead and follow us, and we will get it out there as soon as we have some information about it.
And I have a question here from Luis, and he says, fiance visa, is it taking more than a year? And after you get the fiance visa, can you stay here in the United States?
So the way the fiance visa works is that the first step is here in the US. It's filed as called an I-129F. That's a fiance visa. Then that is sent to immigration here. They will make a decision. Once it's been made a decision here, then it'll be sent overseas. That first step, yes, is taking a little less than a year, but it's still taking a significant amount of time. And Raquel, Attorney Raquel, is that taking about 9 months right now? I think it's taking about 9 months.
I believe it was saying like 10 to 12 months. Yeah. But yeah, it should be less than a year.
Something like that. But what happens is once it's approved here, then it's sent to the consulate where your fiance lives. Then your fiance goes to an interview. Once they get the visa, then they enter the United States, and you have 90 days to get married. And then once you get married, you can file for the green card for your fiance. So, and Attorney Raquel, are you getting that date for us?
I am looking. So it also depends on the service center, because California Service Center says it's taking 13.5, but then other service centers are saying 4 months, 4.5 months. So if you've already applied, your receipt notice will say which service center it went to, and that way you can see the estimated time on uscis.gov. That's uscis.gov.
Okay, had a question here from Cynthia. Cynthia, thank you for your question relating to advanced parole and saying, should you get advanced parole if there's a family member that maybe has a condition outside the United States? What we have found with our clients is that advanced paroles have been fairly safe, that as long as you don't have anything outstanding, orders of removal, things like that, that traveling out and in with an advanced parole with Daca has not been a problem. So if you have somebody that you need to see in another country, especially a family member that may be ill, then yes, we have found that advanced parole has been fairly safe and that has not caused a problem to our clients. They've been able to get right back in. So we found it to be very safe. Yes.
Yep.
I have a question here. Ash, I am 29 years old and want to help my mom get her papers. Does she have to leave the country? So actually, it depends. Since you're a U.S. citizen, 29, you're over the age of 21, you have the right to file for your mother. If your mother entered with a visa, then there's a very good chance that everything can be done here in the U.S. She'll be able to do what's called adjusting her status. So she would then be able to adjust to get a green card. If she entered without a visa, then there are going to be some complications where she may have to leave the United States. So it really depends on how she entered. And you need to be careful because children over the age of 21 are not qualifying relatives for waivers. So if she leaves the U.S. and has to have a waiver to get back in, she would not necessarily be able to rely on you. So you need to be careful with that. So it's going to depend on her entry. She came in with the visa, then yes, probably be able to do it here. She came in without one, then she may have to leave the U.S.
And I do have a question that is kind of related to that as well. It happens very often with these cases. And this one comes from Romero, or RG Romero 20. And he asks, what's the process on a double entry to the United States without legal status? So entering the U.S. twice, what we call EWI, entering without inspection.
So entering without inspection 2 times, and basically it's going to depend the first time how long you were in the U.S. Because if you entered 1 time, stayed for more than a year, then left, that triggered a 10-year bar from returning. If you then entered again without a visa during that 10-year period, that triggers the permanent bar if you leave. So it really depends on that first stay. If you stayed more than a year, yes, it could trigger what's called a permanent bar. And unfortunately, there's no way around the permanent bar for the first 10 years. There isn't a waiver for it. So the permanent bar, after you've been out of the country for 10 years, there is a waiver then you can apply for, but you can't apply for it until you've been out that long. So it's a really, really harsh law, but that's what you're dealing with if you've entered twice, with the first entry being more than a year.
Unless you've been the victim of a qualifying crime, and then maybe we could see if you qualify for a U visa that does have a waiver that will be able to help you. And if you've ever been the victim of a crime and you want to know if it qualifies, definitely set up a consultation, take the police report, or if it went to the district attorney, just give us those documents and we'll be able to let you know if that qualifies for a U visa.
Great point. And we talked about U visas before, and so if you feel like you have been the victim of a crime and you help the police, that may be an option for you with a U visa, because U visa, as Attorney Raquel was saying, has a very strong waiver that can waive a lot of things that other waivers cannot. So, Cynthia, I see you asked another question about emergency. So emergency DACA's emergency advance parole for DACA can be done. What happens? There are two ways you can do it. One, you file normally, and then after you get the receipt notice back, you ask for them to do it in an emergency situation. The other thing is that you can take it and go to your closest field office and ask them to do it in an emergency situation. But in those types of cases, you've got to definitely be able to prove it's an emergency. So for instance, your father's medical records, something like that, to be able to prove that you need to go and go quickly. So that is a possibility. Okay, so DACA, again, no info on DACA yet. We are waiting, but that's why we keep telling people follow us. So that way, as soon as we hear something from DACA, and we're expecting it anytime in the next 21 days. So as soon as we hear about it, we're going to be going on TikTok 2 different times. We're going to be going in all Spanish and in all English to make sure everybody hears about it. So go ahead and follow us. That way you can know for sure the changes on DACA when it comes up. So we're expecting that soon.
And
you had a question?
I have a question here real quick. Melissa Jimenez asks, while waiting for U visa, are you allowed to work? So are you allowed to work while your U visa is pending?
So you're not necessarily allowed to work while your U visa is pending unless you've been given deferred action. So what happens, U visas are taking so long to be approved that the government has started giving deferred action to certain people after it's been pending a certain amount of time. So if you've been given what's called deferred action, you should have received that in the mail, then you are able to get a work authorization card. And a lot of times, if you applied for the work authorization card when you first filed everything, they'll go ahead and send you a card because they already have an application that they can use. But until you get that work authorization card, you're not authorized to legally work in the United States. Okay. Jose, can I fix my status if I'm married to a citizen? How long will it take? So Jose, part of it's going to depend. If you entered the United States with the visa, then absolutely. If you're married to a citizen, your citizen spouse can file for you, and you can file for a green card at the exact same time. And it's taking about a year. That's what we're seeing. So from the time you file until you go to your interview, it's taking about a year. If you came in without a visa, then there are going to be additional steps that you're going to have to do, because you'd have to leave the country and come back in. That process is going to require a waiver, and then that process will also expected to take, depending on which country it is. If it's Mexico, it could be a lot longer. If it's not Mexico, still expected to take at least 2.5, 3 years for that whole process to work through the way it is right now.
Mm-hmm. And I have the final question on my end here, and this one comes from Marova61, and he is asking about the fiancé visa. So he says, Form I-129F, what documents do I need to submit, and what the cost of filing the I-129F?
Okay. So Attorney Raquel is going to get you that price right now. I can see her already looking it up. So yeah. She's already on top of it. Yeah. But as far as what documents you send, it's hard to say without speaking to you individually to learn more about your relationship. But just think what you have to prove is you have to prove that your relationship is real. So you have to submit evidence that you've flown or gone to the country and seen your fiance within the last 2 years. So provide evidence of that, but then evidence of your relationship. And that could be pictures, emails, other communication, letters from friends and family. So it really varies as case to case. It really depends on each person's individual case. But those are the types of things you have to prove. One, you have to prove that your relationship is real, that you really intend on getting married, and that you've seen your fiance, physically seen them within the last 2 years.
Yep, and you can look this information up on uscis.gov and just search I-129F. The filing fee is $535, so the filing fee is what goes to the government to process this application. And I know that he was also wondering where to go to file. It'll tell you where to file on that website as well. I could give you the address, but you won't be able to memorize it. Definitely just go to uscis.gov and search I-129F.
Exactly. Got a great question here. I think it's a great question. So Jennifer's your question about any options for people that have DACA, but they don't want to get married. That's a great question because you put work here. We've actually been successful. It's a great strategy, thinking outside the box a little bit. So I love that question. And so, yes, it is possible, but that would require us to really do a consultation with you. And the reason is because of unlawful presence. If you enter the United States without a visa, every day that you stay after you enter counts against you as unlawful presence. However, it does not start counting against you until you turn 18 years old. So if you entered the United States and you obtained DACA before you turned 18, you may not have any unlawful presence. And what that would mean is that there's a good chance your employer may be able to file for you, you consular process, go get the visa, come back in. As soon as you come back in, they stamp your passport, you are a permanent resident right then, and they'll mail you a green card. So that's a great strategy, one that we have used before. And I like the way you're thinking there. That is pretty awesome. So that's a great strategy. So that's one thing we love to do is we love trying to find creative strategies to complex issues. And so that's a great strategy. Great question there. Thank you for putting that question in there. And let me see, how long for the renewal residence? So it looks like renewing a green card. So for renewing a green card, right now it's taking over a year. But the good news is when you renew your green card, if you're doing it because it's going out of date, they will extend your green card. So what happens is as long as you have your green card and your receipt notice showing that it's been extended for 18 months, you can travel, get a driver's license, do whatever you need to do. If you go to a new job and you need evidence to prove that you're a permanent resident at the new job, that's what you use. You use your green card and your receipt notice to show that it has been extended. So good question there.
And I have another question here that's very interesting too. And it is from JNS001. And he says that his girlfriend is in the process of getting a U visa. He has DACA. They want to get married. And he's wondering if he can be included in that U visa application.
And that's a very good question as well. So, and the reason that's a great question is that's something that's kind of new, is that once a U visa was filed, there really wasn't a way to get a spouse added if you got married after the fact. But they changed that rule a little bit because it has been taking so long to get the status. So what they've done is if somebody's in U visa status and they get married, they can have their spouse join them on the U visa as long as it is filed and in process before the U visa is approved. Once the U visa is approved, you can't go back and do it. But if you get married before the U visa is approved, there is a way to be able to do that and you be included on that U visa. Okay. There we go. And question about DACA renewal. DACA renewals were actually, Gabriella, we're actually seeing that come back quickly let me rephrase that. Quickly for immigration. And what that basically means is that I think we're seeing it 4 months. We've seen some come back 3, but we're telling most people expect that to take 4 months to get your renewal. Now, I wouldn't chance it and then wait until 4 months before your card expires to do it. But expect it to come back in 4 months. We still recommend filing within 6 months. So.
And I have another question regarding DACA, and this is from Blanca Buenrostro, and she asks, what if you have DACA, but you have 2 illegal entries when you were little without a visa? So they entered unlawfully twice when they were under 18.
So that could create a problem. So we would need to talk to find out the very specifics about the entry, the exit, and the reentry, because unfortunately, it's very strange, and we're getting ready to sue the government in federal court over this. But what happens is until you turn 18, they don't count unlawful presence against you. But for purposes of 212A9C, which is that double entry that we've been talking about, creating the permanent bar, is that even though they do not count the days against children, if they are here for more than a year, leave and come back, they still give them that bar. And so right now, it is an issue. This is something that we are considering suing the government on, because we do not believe that is a fair application of the law. And so we're looking for the right case to take forward in federal court. But that is something we're looking at, because we do not feel that that's a very good application of the law. But right now, that is how it's being applied. So you have to be careful with that. Even though the entries happen before you turn 18, that's something you have to be careful with. Okay. Is there any chance to be approved even if there's a deportation order? So it depends on what you mean by approved. If what you're saying is, can you adjust status here in the United States if you have a deportation order? The answer is no, not until you get that order taken care of, unless it's through something like a U visa. But if what you're looking at is, if you're talking about approved through a spouse, something like that, through a family member, then you have to get the deportation order taken care of. And also, if you're going outside the United States and then coming back in, there's a waiver that helps get rid of the deportation order. So the answer is you have to be careful there, but there is a chance that it still can be approved. It just depends on what you mean by approved. The first step definitely can be approved, though. Yes. Okay. Let me see. So Christian, this is a great question. We haven't seen this come up today, but it is something that's very important. So can you submit a request for prosecutorial discretion? And so the answer is, if you're asking us specifically, can we do it? Yes, we do those all the time. But what prosecutorial discretion is that if you're in removal proceedings, that you can ask the government to dismiss your case. So that you're no longer in removal proceedings, and you don't have to worry about getting a deportation order from the judge or an order of removal. So those are requests that we do all the time. So Christian, if you want to set up a consultation with us and we can review your case and see if you're a good applicant for prosecutorial discretion, just give us a call and we'll get that set up. Number 704-522-6363. But yes, prosecutorial discretion can still be asked for. And the reason that's important is because you've heard in the news possibly recently that they got rid of prosecutorial discretion. But that's not what happened. What they did is they got rid of blanket prosecutorial discretion, which means that anybody that fell in this category automatically got prosecutorial discretion. That is gone, but prosecutorial discretion, meaning that the government can still consider your case and dismiss your case, that is still available. So that has not gone away. Okay, so maybe just one or two more, and then we're going to have to close for today. But again, any questions that did not get answered, you can come in on Friday if you want them in Spanish, and you'll be able to hear it Spanish. You can come back, join us next week at noon, and we'll be answering as many questions as we can. Again, just like today. And if you want to, you can also set up a consultation with us, and the phone number is below. So if if it looks like if you have the time bar with the waiver, can you still have a F2B green card denied? And so F2B is a category that for certain family members. So the F2B is not the issue. The issue is, if you have to file a waiver, do you have a qualifying relative? If you have a qualifying relative that can file for that waiver, then the answer is yes. You can still move forward with the F2B, get approved, come back in the United States, and be a permanent resident. But it's going to depend on, do you have a relative that can file that waiver? That's the biggest thing. Okay, and had this question pop up a few times, so I'm going to get this one. This will be the last one we can do here. You have Daca and your sister is a citizen, but you're older than her. So age of a citizen, so a sister can always apply for another sister. The problem with those applications, and I'm not saying don't do it, I'm just letting you know, is that it's taking a very long time. A sister filing for another sister right now is taking an average of around 13 years, somewhere in that range. And if it's in Mexico, it's over 20 years. So it's taking a very long time for a sister to file for another sister at this point. And so I had a request to give the phone number one more time. Our phone number is 704-522-6363. Again, 704-522-6363. So Attorney Raquel, thank you for joining us today. It's been a great day, a lot of great questions today.
Definitely. And I know I was answering some questions there, typing them out because we had so many. But if we didn't get to your question, or maybe you stepped away and you didn't hear us answer it, remember that it will be on YouTube. I'll be posting this video on YouTube. And also, if we didn't get to your question, you can call us for a free consultation. The number is listed on both profile bios, and we look forward to talking to you.
Absolutely. Everybody have a great day. Thank you for joining us. Thank you all for all the likes, all the shares, and all the questions. Those were some great questions. And again, we just want to get as much information out there to as many people as possible. The best way to make sure that people are protected is get information in their hands. Information is power. So that's what we definitely want to do. So I hope the information was beneficial. We will see you guys next week. Thank you very much.